They actually did it. You can only poke the bear so many times before it wakes up and tears the tent down. For years, the bureaucrats in Brussels thought they had a cheat code. They thought they could just print fines instead of building companies. They treated American tech giants like a piggy bank to fund their own failing digital sovereignty. Well, the credit card just got declined. The official statement from Europe is the same tired script. We're enforcing antitrust laws. This is about fairness. Don't buy it. The raw numbers tell a different story. This was a $2.95 billion cash grab against Google, plain and simple. But this time, Washington didn't send a strongly worded letter. They loaded a weapon called Section 301. This isn't a trade dispute anymore. It's an economic execution. Why should you care? Because if you think this is just billionaires fighting billionaires, you are missing the blast radius. When the U.S. retaliates, they aren't going to tax French wine or Italian cheese. They're targeting the infrastructure of your daily life. And the scariest part? The U.S. hit list includes a specific name, a company that proves this isn't just about money. It's about killing Europe's future before it even starts. To understand why this is a kill shot, you have to rewind the tape. You have to go back to 2015. Actually, no, go back deeper. Go back to the moment Europe decided it was easier to regulate the future than to build it. The Transatlantic Partnership didn't die yesterday. It died in a committee room in Brussels 10 years ago. We're just reading the autopsy report today. The data history is the undeniable. Look at the S&P 500 versus the Stoxx Europe 600 over the last 15 years. It's not a gap, it's a canyon. The U.S. tech sector, the Magnificent Seven or whatever the pundits call them this week, added trillions in value. What did Europe add? Directives. The European Union made a silent, terrifying calculation around the mid-2010s. They looked at the data, cloud computing, social media, mobile operating systems, and realized they had lost the war. They didn't have a Google, they didn't have an Amazon, they didn't have an OpenAI. They had rules. So they pivoted their entire economic model. They stopped trying to compete on innovation and started competing on regulation. It started with the GDPR in 2018. The mainstream narrative sold it to you as privacy, but if you look at the compliance costs, it was a moat. It was a tax designed to make sure no American startup could operate cheaply in Europe, and crucially, no European startup could ever grow big enough to challenge the incumbents because the legal fees alone would bankrupt them. Then came the Digital Markets Act, or DMA, then the Digital Services Act, or DSA. The fines ramped up exponentially. Millions became billions. The $2.95 billion hit on Google in September wasn't an accident. It wasn't a penalty. It was a line item in the EU budget. They built a regulatory superpower designed to siphon liquidity from Silicon Valley to Brussels. It worked for a decade because the U.S. was too polite to stop it. The old U.S. strategy was engagement. We sent diplomats to cocktail parties in Davos. But the data changed on December 16th. The U.S. stopped sending diplomats. They sent Jameson Greer, and he didn't bring a handshake. He brought a sledgehammer called Section 301. Now, the standard argument you'll hear on every news channel, BBC, DW, CNN, is always the same. But the EU is just protecting privacy. They are fighting monopolies to help the little guy. Google is a bully. That is a lie. That is the wrapper they put on the poison pill. If this were about privacy, why is the EU building its own surveillance infrastructure like chat control? If this were about monopolies, why do they shield their own legacy telecom giants from competition? The data proves that the Digital Markets Act was never about fair competition. It was a protectionist tariff disguised as law. They call companies like Apple and Alphabet gatekeepers to justify taking a cut of their revenue. It's not antitrust, it's rent-seeking. It's a protection racket. Nice digital ecosystem you have there. Shame if someone fined it 10% of global turnover. The USTR explicitly called this out. The language in the report is savage. They labeled the EU's actions as sovereignty extraction. Think about that phrase. The US government is saying you aren't regulating our companies, you are robbing them because your own economy is stagnant. And here is the kicker. The straw man argument falls apart when you look at who the US is targeting in return. If the US was just bullying, they would target French wine or Italian luxury bags, the usual suspects. But they aren't. They're targeting Mistral AI. Mistral is a French company. It's Europe's only serious contender in the large language model race. By putting Mistral on the Section 301 hit list, the US is shattering the fairness argument. The message is, you try to kill our current tech giants with fines, we'll kill your future tech giants with tariffs. It proves the US sees this as a war for the control of intelligence itself, not just ad dollars. The real-world translation. So what happens now? What does this actually mean for you? Because when that Section 301 lever gets pulled, it's not a debate, it's a mechanism. When the US retaliates, the cost of being a European company in the US market explodes. And this isn't abstract high finance stuff. This hits the payroll. Take Spotify. It's a Swedish national treasure. But look at their user base. The growth is in the US. If the US slaps a 25% digital services retaliatory tax on Spotify subscriptions, the math breaks instantly. Your $11.99 monthly fee becomes $15. Users will cancel. They will switch to Apple Music, which won't have the tax. Spotify's margins are already thin. A 25% tariff doesn't just hurt earnings, it threatens solvency. The stock crashes, layoffs in Stockholm. Take Siemens. This is German industrial royalty. They don't just make trains, they run the factory automation software for half of America's manufacturing base. If their software license fees get hit with retaliatory levies, American factories will look for alternatives. They will switch to Rockwell Automation or Honeywell. Siemens loses its most critical export market. The German economy, already teetering on recession, gets pushed off the cliff. And take Accenture, domiciled in Ireland for tax reasons, but massive in the US. If the US decides to treat their consulting services as a European import subject to duties, the entire professional services market goes into chaos. This translates to pain. It means pension funds holding these safe European stocks take a massive haircut. It means the digital single market becomes a digital island, isolated, expensive, obsolete. The false hope. But here is the most dangerous part. The market is currently pricing in a negotiation. The algorithms and maybe your own financial advisor are thinking, oh, this is just Trump negotiating tactics. Von der Leyen will fly to Washington, they'll drink coffee, Google will pay half the fine, and it goes away. That is the false hope trap. You have to look at the game theory. The EU cannot back down. If Brussels cancels the Google fine, they admit their entire digital sovereignty legal framework is a sham. They admit the DMA is negotiable. They lose political legitimacy instantly. The entire European project is built on the idea that they are a super regulator. If they fold, they are nothing. And the US? The US has no reason to stop. The tech sector is the only engine keeping the American GDP green. The US energy sector is strong, yes, but tech is the crown jewel. The current administration views the EU's fines not as legal penalties, but as foreign looting of American wealth. They have the leverage, they have the growth, they have the AI. The window for negotiation is 30, maybe 60 days, but the incentives are misaligned. Europe needs the money, the US needs the dominance. This isn't a drift toward a resolution, it is a collision course toward a fractured internet. It is a collision course toward a fractured internet. But to really grasp how this breaks the machine, we need to strip away the trade law jargon. Forget Section 301, forget DMA. The concept analogy. Imagine a high-stakes poker game. For the last 20 years, the US has been the high roller. They brought the chips, capital, they invented the game, internet, and they won almost every hand, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Meta. Europe is the house. They host the game. They provide the table, the market of 450 million users. And like any casino, they take the rake, a small percentage of the pot. That was the deal. The US wins the hands, Europe takes the rake via standard taxes, and everyone gets rich. But around 2015, the house started losing money. Their own players, Nokia, Ericsson, SAP, busted out. The casino needed cash to pay the electric bill, so the pit boss, Brussels, changed the rules. They didn't just take the rake anymore, they started fining the high roller for winning. You won that hand too fast? Fine. You have too many chips? Fine. You didn't share your cards with the losing player next to you? Massive fine. The House EU became addicted to these fines. They built their entire budget on the expectation that the high roller would just pay up and keep playing because he had nowhere else to go. But yesterday, the high roller stood up. He didn't just cash out. He pulled a gun, put it on the table, and said he's buying the building across the street. The Section 301 investigation is the U.S. saying, we aren't playing in your casino anymore if the games are rigged, and if you touch our chips one more time, we are going to burn your casino down. This destroys the European model because the casino needs the high roller. The high roller does not need the casino. The U.S. tech giants have the rest of the world. They have AI. Europe just has a table that is rapidly becoming empty. The empathy trap. It is easy to mock the bureaucrats, but you have to understand they're trapped. The math has them in a chokehold. Ursula von der Leyen, Maroš Šefčovič, they aren't stupid. They see the same data I do. They know that fining Google doesn't create a European Google. They know that crushing US tech makes Europe less competitive. But they can't stop. Why? Because the European social model is expensive. The pensions, the healthcare, the infrastructure, it costs trillions, and their economy isn't growing. Productivity is flat. The only place to find new money is to extract it from the entities that are growing, American corporations. If they stop the fines, they look weak, and the budget holes open up. If they continue the fines, the U.S. crushes them with tariffs. They're in a doom loop. To save their political sovereignty, they have to destroy their economic reality. They are trying to legislate relevance in a world that only respects speed. The pattern interrupt. I know, it sounds impossible. It sounds like I'm exaggerating the fragility of the EU position. You're probably thinking, Germany is too big to fail. The US needs Europe for NATO. They won't actually burn the bridge. Look at the list again. Mistral AI. That is the tell. If the US wanted to negotiate, they would have targeted French luxury goods, Louis Vuitton, champagne, things that hurt pride but not potential. By targeting Mistral, Europe's only AI unicorn, the US is signaling that they don't care about the alliance anymore. They care about the timeline. They are accelerating the timeline where the US owns 100% of the AI stack, and Europe becomes a client state, a digital colony. The domino effect. So watch the sequence. It's a mechanical cascade. Domino 1. The tariff wall. The U.S. implements the 15 to 25% tariffs on European digital services in Q1 2026. Domino 2. The capital flight. Investors look at Spotify, Siemens, and Mistral. They see companies with a 25% handicap in the world's biggest market. What do? They sell. The stock prices of European tech champions collapse. Domino 3, the forced migration. This is the death blow. To survive, Spotify and Mistral have a choice. They can stay in Europe and die, or they can move their headquarters to the US. If Mistral moves to Delaware to avoid the tariffs and access US chips, Europe loses its AI future. If Spotify moves to New York, Sweden loses its tech crown. Domino 4, the brain drain. The engineers follow the companies. The smartest minds in Berlin, Paris, and Amsterdam realize there is no liquidity left in Europe. They move to San Francisco, Austin, and Miami. Domino 5, the museum economy. Europe is left with regulation, but nothing to regulate. It becomes a museum, a place Americans visit on vacation to see old buildings and eat good food, while the actual economic engine of the world runs entirely on U.S. servers, under U.S. law, paying U.S. taxes. The Brussels effect, the idea that Europe sets the global rules, inverts. It becomes the Brussels cage. They can make all the rules they want inside the cage, but the birds have already flown away. They can make all the rules they want inside the cage, but the birds have already flown away. And this brings us to the part of the download that nobody wants to hear. We have to look at the timeline for the next 12 months. The ugly truth. I know the mainstream financial press is telling you to buy the dip on European tech stocks. They are telling you that cooler heads will prevail. Do not listen to them. The statistical probability of a de-escalation is near zero. Why? Because the U.S. election cycle has fundamentally shifted the incentives. The new administration isn't measuring success by diplomatic stability. They are measuring it by dominance. Here's the forecast. Q1 2026, the tariffs stick. The U.S. imposes the 25% levy on European digital services. Q2 2026, retaliation fails. The EU tries to countersue in the WTO, but the WTO is paralyzed. The EU threatens U.S. agriculture, but the U.S. simply prints subsidies for its farmers and keeps the boot on the neck of European tech. The splinter net hardens. By next summer, you will see the first region locks. New AI features from OpenAI or Google will launch in the US, UK, and Japan, but you will get a not available in your region screen in Germany and France. The vision. If you zoom out, you can see exactly where this leads. We are moving toward digital feudalism. In this future, Europe becomes a digital colony. It will be a place that consumes technology but creates none of it. Imagine a society where your businesses pay a rent to American AI lords for every email you write and every image you generate. Your smartest engineers leave for Austin or Singapore because they can't legally build what they want to build in Munich. The European economy effectively becomes a museum economy, a beautiful place for rich Americans to vacation, eat cheese, and look at old buildings, while the actual value creation happens on servers in Northern Virginia. The Brussels effect is dead. We are entering the age of Washington dictates. The life advice. So what do you do? If you are reading this in Europe, or if you hold assets tied to this system, you need to pivot. 1. Stop betting on the safety net. The government cannot protect you from this. They can't regulate their way to prosperity. If your business relies on EU grants or compliance subsidies, you are walking dead. 2. Become permissionless. Learn the tools that don't care about borders. Learn to use local LLMs or large language models that run on your own hardware, not just the cloud APIs that can be tariffed or blocked. Data sovereignty isn't about what the state owns, it's about what you own. 3. Hedge your geography. If you have capital, diversify it. Do not be 100% exposed to the Eurozone. Look at markets that are aligning with the accelerationist bloc, the US, parts of Asia, the Gulf. The sign-off. The era of the global village is over. The walls are going up. You can either stand there complaining about the bricks, or you can learn how to climb. Don't listen to the speeches. Watch the tariffs. Watch the server logs. Trust the patterns, not the promises. I'll see you in the comments.